So this is the NF2 infra discussion, or you could call it kickoff, right? So yeah, I did. By the way, on the Slack channel, I put. Let me share my screen. I put a starting point of the. Desktop, yeah. So I put a starting point on the. So we have a Slack channel, which is this basically. I put here at the top the objective that we have. So this is the document that we worked on with Bernard and with Eric, right? So I don't know how familiar you are with this, because that's, I think, a little bit of the starting point. So are people familiar, or we have to go through quickly? If people are familiar, I prefer not to go through, but if we have to, we'll do, right? So the idea in general is that we would like to focus on, so basically have a better view on what a network function has and what are the dependencies towards the infra, right? So that is basically the scope what we are trying to cover. I have put here, so there is an agenda, but I didn't have really a lot of topics. I did start to, let's say, think about some of these things myself a little bit. So I don't know, would that be a good start to basically start the discussion? So I put something on a slide. Where did I do it? Here, yeah. So I put here some discussion topics on the slide, so which I thought could be useful for the discussion itself. So first of all, my assumption for now is that we should act solely on KRM. So meaning we specify whatever the mechanism is, but so towards the infra, even for example, if we have a kernel module that we need to install, for me it should be described through a KRM element, right? How that looks like, I'm making abstraction out of it at the moment, but because it simplifies, it helps a lot, or it makes this system way more easy, I think, if we do so. So that's why I would do it. So even if we, let's say, for example, if we have to install a kernel module on a host, if we can describe it through KRM, most likely there will be something that takes the KRM and then translates it into what the host needs, right? So into a Linux command. But at least from requirements and how the system works and figure out the dependencies, we act based on that KRM resource. So that also means, in my mental model right now, that if you say I need this kernel module, that there will be something that is also going to report that this kernel module was installed. So there is a kind of a controller, or the implication of this is basically that we are assuming that there is something, in our case, typically a controller of some sort, that takes in the KRM as the intent, right? And is going to then actuate it and report the status up from it towards something that basically picks it up and then can validate whether that element has been actuated or not, right? So that's a little bit an assumption that I've personally been taking. So I don't know how you guys or how you feel about that.
I would agree. And if we are aligning on that point, then we should put that as a guideline into the modeling section, so that we then say if this is then something which should be considered when trying to describe, for instance, requirements and capabilities to a certain
I would say, yeah. So this is basically, that I don't know how to capture it, but I'll put them right now. The second thing that I wanted to discuss is, okay, yeah, you have a question, Gurav?
Yeah, I just wanted to check. So there's a list of dependency, right? So are we saying one custom resource describing all the dependencies, and then there is a status corresponding that this is checked? Or are we saying that for each dependency there is a KRM resource?
So that's a good point. And okay, I did not or basically make a view on that. Or I've done a bit of prototyping myself on how the system could work. So for now, I've been trying to model a little bit, but and okay, this is my personal view, but it's just so I'm a practical person, so I always love to see how it works in reality. I have the feeling because I mean I started to have some threads on the Slack channel, whether we should group it into software packages and config and stuff like that. But right now, my view is a little bit more to I start with one big with one KRM that describes requirements, but they would be, let's say, reflecting more specific elements, and those could be one or multiple KRMs. But I think this is my personal view right now, but we have to discuss it more. So when I talk about KRM here, I don't think we should make the assumption whether it's one or multiple for now, right? So that's something we have to reflect. It can be one or multiple, right? Yeah. Sorry, Bernard, you had a question?
I would like to differentiate, not a question, but a remark. So I would like to differentiate a little bit between dependency requirements and capabilities, in the sense of that if I've got a capability, I'm not really actually saying sort of who will actually have a dependency to those capabilities. Yeah, that means this needs to be open because we do not know what kind of network functions might be wanting to make use of infrastructure capabilities, for example. Yeah. So I would regard, you've been mentioning, for instance, kernel modules, that we would need a KRM to describe these kernel module customization possibilities of the infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
The dependency would be the relationship between a requirement and a capability. It means there's a specific network function having a requirement for that specific capability, and as soon as that is given, then there's a dependency expressed in that manner. So we should try to be very careful about sort of what we are regarding to be sort of a KRM module. How we describe dependencies could be that it's a combination of how we link those things together. Just to maybe it makes sense to come up also with some kind of taxonomy of describing these different elements.
Yeah, I think it makes more. So from the moment we do a little bit of practical stuff, I think it probably becomes more clear on what we mean here, right? So yeah. Then the second, let's say, discussion topic for now that I wanted to discuss is, are we okay to focus completely on a single cluster for now, right? So because this thing so that we basically focus on that for now as a starting point, because it simplifies things in my view a little bit.
From my point of view, that's okay.
Yeah.
You could also, but think on the other direction as well, because you might have a set of network functions which should be put onto one cluster, and then the question again would be: do you want to only sort of reflect the relationship between one network function in the cluster, or several network functions in a cluster? Because then you might have contradicting requirements, etc., to be considered here.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Good to include multiple network functions, right? But yeah, so I think I see the point is this: given that we are nowhere yet at the moment, I rather focus on something and try to come up with a model around it, and then I see what do we need to change if we apply it to other things. But if we start to boil the ocean all over the place, my experience is that you never achieve anything. So I try to narrow for now. I a little bit narrower for now, but then we have to open it up again. But I think for me, the reasoning right now, if you take a single cluster, is simplifying the discussion potentially, right?
I think that makes sense, Jim, but we just probably need to have an eye on the multiple cluster thing as we're going along.
Yeah, so this is just to ease the brainstorming, right?
Yeah.
So we need to keep multiple clusters in mind, right? Right. I'll just put rough notes right now, at least that we capture a little bit this thing. Okay, then model logic. I started to model something. We'll discuss that in a bit. Then version dependencies. Yeah, so this is an interesting. Actually, it goes a little bit towards towards the modeling itself. I mean, I've been thinking around this a little bit. Is that how? And it goes a little bit to that topic somehow. So I started to sketch a little bit a system or building blocks. So this is very high level right now. And for me, what I concluded myself so far was, okay, we start with requirements, whether it's a single or multiple. I think it's let's say it's orthogonal at the moment, but it should include software and configuration. Now, if we talk about KRM, it doesn't really matter, right? Because KRM, it can mean anything. And for me, we don't even have to distinguish between host requirements and software packages and stuff like that. There is requirements, and I distinguish just between software and configuration, but at the end of the day, that's also not really needed if we say KRM is the thing, right? Because then there is a KRM for software and there's a KRM for configuration at the end of the day. Now, what I then for myself said, okay, typically when we, and actually I'm experiencing myself this problem, by the way. So what you typically describe here, or I think you want to describe, is there are things that you completely control. So that is basically your ownership. So for example, if we say, I need a CRD and you own that CRD, then that's you, right? So there is no, so the dependency is yourself. But for example, there is then other things that you describe or that you are depending upon somehow. In other words, an example of this is I need a load balancer, right? I need a service. I need an IP address of some sort. I don't care which one it is, but so these are things that you are somehow depending upon. And today what you see is that, okay, even in Nokia, if we build a package, it's a mix of all of this, right? And that's probably causing some of these complications that we have right now. But okay, so this is just a reflection of what I just realized myself. Yeah, Bernard, you have a
yeah. So as you sort of mentioned, also shown in this diagram, we need to have some kind of indication where we can separate those two parts of a specification or
yes,
requirements description. That means in the modeling guidelines, we should ideally have some kind of mechanism where we can identify which of those elements is sort of only reconfiguring the resource itself, and which are related to establishing relationships to other components and other model elements.
Yeah.
And this could be either, for instance, by saying that, for instance, in the spec of a KRM, we have a certain sort of part of the spec which is related to dependencies. Or we could have a separate KRM, which is bridging together capabilities of sort of the components and saying sort of there is one component which requires the sort of that another component is available. There's one thing which I am a little bit worried about, and that is the interpretation. So just imagine that we've got a capability, and the capability sort of is described as a KRM. And we would like to make sure that this capability is sort of available when, for instance, onboarding a network function. Could be that this capability has certain parameters which the other element requires in order to continue its work and continue its setup.
Yeah.
Therefore, we would have to also try to specify how would we identify those exposed capabilities, those service endpoints or elements which are then made available as soon as sort of this resource is available. That means it would also require certain guidelines of how we would have to reflect that in the status of the capability, for instance.
Right. Stephen, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I actually think that this is where the capability things is a little fuzzy, because if the animal functions intent is to install GDP 5G kernel module version 0.8, that is not a capabilities of the infra. That is a requirement of the network functions. You're asking infra to say my capabilities, I can support loading of that kernel module, but this is, yeah, sure. But then there's no version limitations or anything like that, because the infra wouldn't be able to track that for sure. So that's very hard of a match between that requirements. I need version XYZ of this kernel module versus and then match the capabilities at runtime, because it may or may not actually be very explicit. Based on this model, anyway.
Yeah, so at the moment, the model I did not here split between requirements and capabilities myself, right? For me, yeah, so they are a bit intertwined a little bit. So I didn't make the distinction yet. So yeah, but Bernard,
this is more like a flat requirement. This is more like, oh, for 3.5GC UPF to run, I need kernel GTP 5G version something that is supported by this particular Helm. Then this particular nephew version of creation of whatever versions of 3.5GC they download, then that's, infra doesn't have a capability exposures of saying that this I would support version X to Y, because actually that's a pretty big test matrix to be able to cover all of that for as capabilities to have a runtime matched, basically.
Yes, yeah. Because I think software versioning is an important discussion. I think we should, which I wanted to go next to, but let's first hear what Bernard has to say.
Yeah, Stephen, I just wanted to mention why we need this distinction regarding infrastructure, and why we're not simply saying the network function can simply try to make that available as on its own, because we've got this sort of split of responsibilities. There might be certain elements where you require root access for making these changes to your system. And therefore we need to have a clear way of how we can express this requirement and have it being managed by the infrastructure team in a well-defined manner. If we would simply say you can do whatever you like with a cluster as soon as we've started the Kubernetes API, then we will have a lot of discussions regarding responsibilities and service level agreements, quality assurance, etc.
So this isn't so much a requirement to keep it. It's more like a requirement imply by this need from network functions that would have in order to satisfy this installations, the infrastructure needs to expose to network, needs to match what permissions and things that are actually given to the network functions.
Yeah, but you wouldn't want to give, basically, you wouldn't want to give them root access. Yeah, that you
correct. So Bernard, maybe, so that's why so far we are describing requirements, right? So at some point we have a set of KRM, right? Now, that's why I think we need this step, right? Is because before this step, I think something else will need to happen from my view. But like you said, is at some point, so what is before that step here, in my view, is there will be the requirements that you have here. At least my example right now shows me that this KRM will be there will be variations of that KRM depending on the environment, right? So I'll come back here, right, on the root privileges and stuff like that, but. What my experience is this, right? So I'm doing this multi-cluster networking, right? This right now. So I actually have this working, but I have a bunch of stuff that I need in order for me to succeed. So an example here is I need a load balancer with an external IP that I can access the workload clusters to, right? Now, I can specify this requirement that I need it, but for us to check whether it's relevant, there will be environment variations, I call it. Maybe it's not a good word, but there will be specific things that will change depending on how you or where it is deployed and how it is consumed. So there will be, so what I call it environment variations. Software could also be an element here. And here is what I'm saying is, it could be, now the kernel module is maybe a bad example, but no, it's maybe a good example, because in kernel module, typically the software says, I need this version and only this version, right? But in other cases, we could say here, we need cert manager, right? Or we need metal LB. And okay, the requirement here could be, I need this version, but I'm expecting that the operator that is using it has selected a certain version and would probably say, okay, if you really need this version, okay, I need to see which version I'm going to use in production, and I need to test it before I allow this to happen, right? So in other words, would there, in my metal model, there is going to be, from what is specified here, let's say it's coming from the vendor somehow, there's going to be what I call a variation that makes it a variant towards the environment it is deployed upon. And some of these things will be strict and some of them will be soft, in which case they will mutate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I would want to start with a sort of a simpler model. Maybe I would agree with you that this could happen, yeah. But I was just wondering if we could start with a simpler model, in the sense of just imagine that we would do it in a similar manner like we do software management on a Linux host, and we've got semantic versioning for the different capabilities, and basically saying sort of we will have a certain requirement. And this requirement basically should sort of comply with version greater than 2.0 whatever. Yeah. And based on that, then sort of the capability would then derive, okay, I can sort of the operator for this capability, KRM, I'd say, okay, I can provide a version 2.7, which would then sort of comply with this requirement, or it would say, no, look here, it doesn't work. We don't have an element which would support that version request.
Yeah, so I think that, yeah, so I agree that for software versioning, we probably need something that we say minimum version X or has to be strict or something like that. Yeah, yeah. Boyan, you have a...
Yeah, thanks. I'm sorry if I'm a little bit behind. I haven't read all of the available things yet. But what I feel in this discussion is that we have three somehow different processes involved in this. So number one, we need to have a way to express or to declare the objects of interest. Those are the objects which may have dependencies, or yeah, for example, a kernel module. So first we have to be able to declare them, and they should end up in some kind of an inventory. And then a separate thing is to express our network function dependencies upon those objects. And then a completely different thing is whether or not we're going to try to fulfill any of those missing dependencies. So those are, to me, three different things. Number one, you need an inventory. So you need to be able to discover either the presence or a specific property of these objects, let's say kernel module, and you need it in general, right? So whether or not you have dependencies or you're acting upon is a different story. And then later on you have to say, well, but before I run, I need to have this kernel module.
Yeah.
So this should be probably something slightly different. And then it's always a decision. Okay, I don't have the kernel module. Should I try to fulfill this requirement, or should I just fail?
Yeah, that's what we are trying to do somehow right now. Of course, but kernel module is a bit of a. maybe, but let's take the example, right? So let's go through the flow, right? So let's say I have a software package. Let's say I have free 5GC, let's call it, right? Which is everything that you own, and he basically has one what I call a dependency. So this piece, so there will be a KRM that says I need kernel version X, right? And let's say it's strict right now. It has to be X, and there is not greater than or whatever, right? So in this case, there's probably not going to be variations because it's going to be that NF with that kernel module, right? And the kernel module is expressed in KRM, right? So the idea at the moment of the system is that the cluster, right? So because we have KRM, so something in the cluster will say that this KRM is there or not. So that's what this step is. So basically this cluster will report through that KRM the status of this thing is and in most cases it's not yet installed, right? Let's assume it's not installed. So this guy here will know this KRM, I don't have it, right? And then so what I try to describe here with approval and validate, right? And that goes to the point that we skipped a little bit right now, is that there has to be a governance, what I call, right? That actually will now say, okay, I allow it, and in order to do this, I need root access, right? So the guy that and either it can be automated, so there could be even you could think of a system that this KRM that is described, we see that it's not actuated. There is a human that is now informed, and the human will act upon. So it's like an API. Hey, I need this kernel module. It's not satisfied. Please go and do it. So the human takes it. He needs root access, so he gets approval and installs it. You could go for a more automated flow that you say, hey, I'm going to make this KRM. I'm going to config sync. So it basically, I approve. Config syncs puts it to the cluster, and there is an agent or an operator that takes the KRM in. And because you allowed this operator to run, which needs privileged access, so you have approved that agent or whatever we call it has that privilege, and it's taking the KRM in and actuate it, and and he will report upon the fact that this is actuated. You see, so both options are, so all of these options are possible with the system, right? So now does that, so what I try to describe here, that's what I'm trying to reflect as a mechanism somehow, right? Yeah, Stephen?
Actually, that's a little more a question for Bernard and Boyan.
Okay.
For what's the operational workflow normally to do something like this? Do you first take the network function vendors that you're targeting, and then you want to automate the process of saying that, oh, because to install Nokia UPF, I need all this stuff, but then the system, and then at runtime you want us to go, you want FEO basically in this case to go check, oh, if all the requirements are set. If not, there could be a trap gate to block us from doing this unless you're the right persona to be able to like root access to install kernel modules and things like that. So maybe a deployment engineer wouldn't be able to do it, or someone else, a server admin would have to do this. Is that more of a common workflow, or is it something that you would qualify first, goes to the server admins and have them send that requirements out, and they'll do the installations before the network functions can be deployed? So I just wonder, are we doing too much? Are we not doing enough? What kind of operational workflow are we looking at to do this normally right now?
Bernard,
Oh, yeah.
Bernard, can I take this?
Yeah, sure. Sure, like.
Right. So we have a kind of a strict split between the teams operating the infrastructure and the teams running workloads. So infrastructure is an infrastructure. It offers certain capabilities, and that's it. You can use them. If you need something very specific, you're likely not going to get it if it was not part of the design. If you can get it, then this process is definitely not automated, and it's not automated by intent, not because we didn't know. But if I need something special to be configured in the infrastructure so my workloads can run, I would have to go to a dedicated team, explain what is it, why is it, and they might do it.
Mm-hmm.
So automating this is very unlikely in our situation, just because of the split of responsibilities.
Yeah. If I may
Infrastructure
add,
is infrastructure,
yeah.
and you're a consumer. You use it as a
consumer. If I may add to that, so what we notice is that, especially in the bare metal cast setup, we are having CI/CD pipelines provisioning these clusters. And basically, it depends on the design process in advance, where the alignment between the network function vendors and the infrastructure guys then determines what kind of elements need to be rolled out with the infrastructure. But this is a handcrafted process. It's every time we have to distinguish what are the capabilities and requirements, and exchange the lingo of the network function providers and the infrastructure providers to come to a common conclusion of how to do that. And this is a tedious, long-running process, which slows deployment procedures often down. And often we have to do this, try it and then fail, and then see what was missing, and then go back again to reestablishing a new CI/CD pipeline for adjusting those requirements. And this we would like to overcome, because it's simply a too slow process for adapting network functions easily on top of our infrastructure.
Yeah, but there are always going to be a limit, So if you start requesting two specific things, you might not be allowed to do that because.
Yeah, but
I'm happy with the 80%. Yeah, I'm happy with the 80%. If we can get
but
80%,
I think Bojan, so here is the view, right? So what we are trying to do here, and I think the way I would like to design it or architect it is in ways that you can have humans involved or that we can have machines do it, right? And that should be your choice at the end of the day, what you take, right? But at the end, so if you look to the pipeline on the left here, what comes out of it is I need a kernel module. Let's say take this kernel module, and that's probably a sensitive one because most likely this is not allowed. But he basically says I need kernel module version X, right? That's basically what comes out of here. Now you have two options in my view on how to go from here. Like you have the manual mode, right? So, but in the first place, now you have a formal specification to the infra team on what you are expecting. Okay. It could be that the infra team says, I don't allow this at all. You have to change your requirement, right? So that is one option. Right? But what we see here right now, for me, this is your formal, let's say, API that the network function or the workload guys have towards the infra. Now, in the manual mode, let's assume that the infra people agree. They will have to, in the manual mode, report, I'm done or I'm not done, right? So at least you now have a way, or this pipeline of installing is will act upon the status of this object, right? And basically the infra people will say, okay, I'm done or I'm not done, right? In the automated mode, or in the more automated mode, is that, okay, there can still be a human that approves this, right? So you can either go full automated or still supervised mode, if you will. In the fully automated mode, what will happen is that, okay, I approve. So this CRD goes to the cluster, and there will be an operator or something that actuates it and report upon it, right? But the flow as such is similar, right? And I think that's how I look at it, what we should try to achieve, so that you have a more formal API between the network function and infra, as well as, and then you have the choice whether you do this in a manual or automated way. But this, I see this as kind of your contract, or your, this is the API or your requirement that you specify, that the workload people specify towards the infra, and the infra report upon. Does it make sense?
Yes, because it makes it explicit. So currently we have only this implicit knowledge somehow hidden in certain software packages or descriptions which are not really easy to read. And now we would have it in an explicit manner, which would allow us to act upon that, either in an automated or a non-automated way.
And this would be spec/status, basically, right? So we use those two things. So spec is the requirement, status is the reality.
Yeah.
And that's how I look at what we have to achieve. Now, the question is, I think the right-hand side is more easy than the left-hand side, if I'm honest, because the right-hand side is basically, okay, if we have a formal way to know what they are, then, or at least that's how I look at it right now. Of course, we need to have things that act upon them, right? So that's the thing. And if it's humans, okay, it's humans. If it's automated, although I don't think, so my personal view is that the right-hand side is not so, even the automated thing is not so, I mean, it's building operators and daemons and stuff like that that do that. So that's not rocket science from my perspective. The challenge is how to do this. That's my personal view, is the challenge is how do we do this in a way that satisfies most of us, right? So, yeah. Sagar? Yeah.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions now. So I mean, first is more about about the approval and the validation part. Why don't we do something where, you know, for example, when we deploy things, either we do it the package variant way or deploy it in the dashboard. I mean, it always go through this procedure of propose and approve.
Yep.
There we can have two steps. Let's say that one for the deployment team, another one for infra team, where the infra team will look at it infra part, that what it wants to approve or not, and the deployment team has to approve. So once the infra team approve, then only the deployment team can approve, and we can always automate it via using package variants, right? That everything goes in automated way if you want to do that. So I think that mechanism is already there.
Yep.
We just need to, you know, bifurcate it. And second thing is that so the KRM you depend on, which is right in the bottom, is something which will be, I think, defined in the package, right? The package, let's say we have an AMF package, or sorry, let's say the UPF package. So there will be something defined by the vendor in a way which we ask the vendor to write it. Let's say that write all your requirements, and that will be processed. And then after that, you know, that requirement will have the software configuration and everything, and then it will go through the whole validation approval state. And once it's just created, and I think the operator of the vendor also needs to listen to it, right? It needs to always keep on checking that it's made or not.
Yeah. That's the status, right? So here you report upon it, right? So here you report upon the status, right? Here you. But yeah, so maybe I'll show. I see. I've been experimenting, so I haven't implemented anything, but I've been experimenting with a model that does this, right? And so yeah, okay. But before we go there, I think let's. Yeah.
Okay.
Liam, yeah, you go first.
Yeah. Just one thing maybe we can think about too is there's requirements, but then there's kind of fulfillment of those requirements. So say if you were actually working towards, say, different cluster suppliers, we probably have to go through some sort of kind of requirements to you know, to fulfillment of those requirements process where, you know, differently. So the DNS really will be working towards the KRM. So it'll be where do you see that coming in?
That's what I call. So are you referring to?
Let's say we were working on, say, Google Cloud or, you know, Azure or you know, AWS or whatever. You know, you might actually, you know, have different ways of different ways of doing the networking there, or you know, if it was, say, something that you were looking for topology, maybe Ericsson or Nokia might have different way, you know, a different topology system, but to be compliant to the same KRM, you know, I don't know, something like that. Yeah?
So that's what I put into this building block somehow, but of course it's I can be very extensive. So I thought let's start basic and then we can make it more extensive going forward. But this is what I call environment variations, right?
Okay.
So this is basically I did not really think about Azure. I mean, this would fall into this category. So if you, for example, say I need network function X, and I want to run it on Azure or AWS or Google or OpenShift, there will be differences. So that should be covered by this block somehow. That was my assumption.
Yeah, there'll be some sort of, you can get awful complicated. I agree, you can get awful complicated on this. I mean, I even remember back
This
in
is
the day.
yeah. So this is can be fairly complicated. We have to be mindful of the complication. Even I mean, I was thinking even of the following, right? Here we specify okay, so that is yet another thing I hidden that right now, but which is this, right? I mean, in most cases today, we specify I need multus, right? Or actually it's better. We specify I need metal LB. It's probably a better example. But there is probably 10 or 20 other ways to implement the load balance, right? And the operator has selected not metal LB, but has selected something else, right? So, or he has selected Nginx, or he has selected, he does its own thing or something like that. So that's yet another, so that's what I call abstraction somehow, right?
But let's stay away from stuff like service brokering and all that stuff, you know.
Yeah, I thought maybe this is a step too far for now. But at the end of the day, it falls into this category somehow, right? Because you could, at the moment, what we probably will say, I want metal LB or I want this. But I think we have to go in a certain phase into this mode that we say we have a more abstract requirement, and then based on the environment, it will actuate it. So that's what I call the expanded KRM or mutate or KRM variations that are modified based on the environments. Like IP addresses that's a simple one probably that get mutated, and that's eventually what will end up being going through the approval process, right? So there needs to be a step in here that does that.
Okay, so maybe mostly bottom up, but a very small piece of top down here is the way to go.
Yeah. Okay, Boyan, you have.
Yeah, it's a question for my own understanding. So we have an infrastructure, right? So it offers one or more APIs via which the consumers can use resources from the infrastructure. So it is fair to say that all of the dependencies that we might express should be against objects exposed in the API.
Yes.
Do you agree with that? Or should we?
Yeah. What it means, in essence, what we are saying, so that's a good point, is that all the, let's say, requirements or dependencies or capabilities, no matter how we call it, are expressed somehow through an API from the infra.
Right. And then potentially they should be also be possible. We should be able to fulfill them via the same API, ideally.
Yes,
but
so
then,
and that would be, the spec would be our requirement, if you will, and the status will be, I'm done. It will be a reflection of this is okay.
But the kernel module is not like that, is it?
See, I think so. Mentally, how this would work. I mean, I've done some prototyping in that space. I actually, right now with my wire, I've done this, for example, right? So it basically does it because it needs to set up a tunnel, right, in the kernel, right?
Yeah.
So I have created an object in KRM, and we could do the same with kernel module to say, here is kernel. So let's say the KRM is kernel module, and of course, what type it is so for example, here we need GDP, but there could be other kernel modules, so that would be in the spec. So we create a KRM, say kernel module, right? Is the CRD, and then in the spec we say it's GTP version X, right? So that's the spec, and then there will be something that takes this in. Whether it's a human or in the case of an operator, it takes in the spec and basically goes and fetches the software and goes and installs it into the kernel, if that would be something that sits onto the cluster. So what would happen here is that this spec would be, let's say if we use today in Nefio, we use config sync. So config sync would actuate it onto the cluster, and then there will be someone who takes it and basically actuates it. And then he reports, I'm done, okay, installed. We reflect it back to the management cluster, and then someone can check, okay, this requirement is satisfied. That would be the flow. And I think that flow is but your point is very, very good, is that it means that actually for all the infra components, we have an API of some sort that allows to do this.
Right. So why I'm asking is because we're mixing up the life cycle a little bit, life cycle of infrastructure and life cycle of application. So what would happen with this flow that you show is me as a tenant, as a user of infrastructure, will trigger automation, which will end up installing a kernel module into the worker node.
Yes.
But I'm not responsible for the life cycle of infrastructure. So tomorrow, the team doing infrastructure will run an upgrade of their Linux operating system, and they don't know that I did that.
No, wait. So just to be clear, that agent, if you will, is the responsibility of the infra and remains the responsibility of the infra.
Okay.
Okay. So in other words, and that's why there is a set of KRM here that is purely infra related, and the roles, so the ownership of those KRM remain in the infra. We are not going to change that, in my view.
Right.
So that's so in other words, what we are doing, so we are doing two things in my view. We are doing, one is a formal specification between the workload and the infra on what they want and so on and so forth, and then the infra would report. So that's the API side. The second thing, I mean, and that's then up to the infra whether they want that or not, is a way to automate that if you go for an agent approach that I described, or they could still do it manually. So that's a choice they have, right? But the ownership of that software, if we do the full automation, remains with the infra. So that's not going to go to the network function. It's just a way for the infra. It's a way the infra people can automate their those type of things. So I don't think we are going to shift the responsibilities here. They remain as they are.
Okay, understood. Thanks.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I have done a bit of conceptual prototyping about this stuff, actually for this multi-networking side, because I need certificate manager, I need IP addresses, I need load balancers and stuff like that. So I have been building. Let me share. So this is just to share. Because I feel that if we discuss practical things, it becomes more tangible, right? You see my screen, right?
Yes.
So, okay, so forget this, but so the wirer is my application, and it's not a network function, but that's the app. Should I make it bigger, by the way?
Yes, please, a bit. That would be nice.
That's better?
Yes, thank you.
So I've been modeling around Terraform at the moment, but forget that right now, right? But at the end of the day, I basically put all my requirements like this, okay? So I decided for the time, and we could split, by the way. So this is just, I'm just experimenting with myself. So this is something I did yesterday. So yesterday. So these are all things that I need. And for example, I need a namespace. In my view, the namespace is not a network function. It's actually an there's a discussion. So I molded, this is an infra thing. So because we had at some point a discussion from the Verizon people that says RBAC rules and namespace. So RBAC rules are responsibility of security team in our case, right? So that's yet another thing. So namespace is one. I need a cluster name somehow. So someone needs to provision a cluster name into the cluster, because you typically cannot get it. So this is just a config map. I need the VXLAN indexings because I need IDs. I need the software. I split it in CRDs. I have RBAC rules. I splitted it. This is just a way that I did it. I'm not saying that this is the way to do it, but at the end of the day, what you can say is for this software, there are a set of things that I would like to accomplish, right? Now, if you look at this, for example, what are things that are completely under my control? So I didn't split it between what I own and what I do, but at the end of the day, the line is here somehow, in my view. So this is really something that I have control over. But for me, RBAC rules it's not a given in a real cluster. It's not a given that you will get it. So this is probably a security thingy. This is a dependency to another software package. Here I'm specifying MetalLB, for example, right? So this is MetalLB. So here I'm very specific. But I splitted this into these type of things, right? And then each of these itself, right? For example, take the software. And this is actually interesting. Going also to the Helm side of the discussion, Liam, right? So this would be, this could be a Helm chart as a certain location that I pick up. I didn't even put software version here, but let's say we get a Helm chart of X, right? So basically, in essence, what the system, what this thing will do, or this requirement, let's say controller will do, it takes in the KRM of various places, right? And even actuated. So in other words, so to make it clear, so this spec somehow is reflecting this. Right?
And the reference point is for one network function or for a set of network functions? How would you put sort of?
At the moment, it's one, but it could easily do multiple. Because
can you show me in the spec where you're referring to the specific network function, identifying that specific network function?
This is the software, right? So this is the, so my thing is not so good, but this is the software, and the software is then indirected. So I say the software is located in this location somewhere on the internet or locally. It's hosted.
Yeah. What I wanted to mention here is I think it might make sense to specify who is the requesting entity.
Yeah.
And what are the elements which are being requested? As you put this demarcation line already, sort of by splitting sort of these requirements, and I believe we should try to be able to distinguish sort of the elements which are requesting sort of these requirements and those elements which are sort of.
I need to see how we do that properly, right? But yeah, so this is what you say, what I own and what I depend upon, right? So that's the
something like that, yes. Yeah, so that we've got
So that's why the depend upon I just thought about before this meeting. So so we are really brainstorming. So but it would be something like this, and here we could even split it further if you want to say, because we are talking infra and network function, but this could also be now.
Yeah, for me as well, maybe the cluster name is a bit different to back because that's something that.
Yeah,
that's something that's probably coming in from Captain, you know, is coming in that it's not really a dependency for me.
You mean RBAC?
No, the cluster name. RBAC is,
but the cluster name is important for this application, right?
Oh, so they need that, but the cluster name, or I don't know, other things that you set yourself, maybe node location or stuff, or whatever things, you know, parameters.
So what your point is, this is not really an infra requirement. I agree with you 100%, Liam, right? So, but it's a dependency that most likely you don't control because there can be other people doing so. But we have to think on how to split this properly. Right?
Absolutely, yeah.
But I would have one additional sort of comment. So just imagine that we would have requirements to different similar entities. Yeah, that means, for instance, you might have certain VRFs or so on, and you want to sort of say for VRF1, you want to call it sort of OAM, and the other VRF is M2M or whatever.
Yeah.
That it might make sense to come up with names where you say depends upon, and this dependency I give a name so that I can refer to the results. And then within that name, I have a specification. It refers to a VRF, and the configuration of that VRF should follow certain constraints, etc. So I would propose in this depends upon to have a certain level of indirection where we sort of give those dependencies a requirement specific name, but within that requirement specific name, we would have then sort of the same elements which you are showing here.
Yeah, so I have that indirection, by the way, Bernard, right? So if you take cluster name, right? Or wait, so let's take metal LB. So this service load balancer, right? I mean, the example is not exactly like you said, but it's very similar. I need an IP address, right?
Yes.
The IP address is something you as an operator will control, right?
Sure.
So, and the same is true for the name in my view. So you have a naming convention, right?
Yes. So let me be very specific about sort of why I'm wanting to do this. So I fully agree with you that the infrastructure providers who are providing these operators will control the IP addresses, naming conventions, etc. But it could be that the network function providers say, I've got my own sort of way of how I would want to reflect the dependencies. And I could have sort of the same dependencies and sort of mentioned in different elements. So we've got, for instance, sort of VLANs for N3, N6, whatever type of interfaces, etc. And I would then call this dependency sort of the N3 VLAN, the N6 VLAN, or whatever, depending on what the network function vendor came up with. So in your sort of this main sort of CRM KRM which you were showing with this array, could you go back to this?
The beginning?
Yes, that one. So just imagine you would say, for instance, sort of depends upon, and then you would write sort of my N3 VLAN.
Yes, yeah, it would be like that, yeah.
Yeah. Colon.
Okay.
Yeah, and then sort of as a specification, then say sort of the resource, the KRM which I'm referring to should be blah blah blah, and then the results of that would always sort of be, of course, managed in the similar way by the operator of the infrastructure provider, but sort of in the referencing and in the recalculation of configurations, etc. It would say, I want to now get the status of my NF N3 VLAN. And then I could refer to that and differentiate that if I would have, for instance, several references to the same type of resource, KRM resource.
Yeah, we are running out of time, I think, unfortunately. But
yeah,
and we are going already very detailed. But it's always good to maybe we can maybe take 1 or 2 minutes to say, okay, when are we going to meet next?
Is it next Tuesday then, or what you've got?
Yes, I didn't put this as a recurring because there is a bit of a mix. Also, next week I will be in the US again, so the time is a bit bad for me, I think, next week.
It's probably bad time for for America east of Pacific time. Even for Pacific time, it's not great.
No. So I would prefer to do the 8 o'clock slot, but then there's a lot of people who cannot make it on the US side, which is a shame. So we could do, what I would propose is to do 8 o'clock on Tuesday or Wednesday or something, or Tuesday or Thursday or something like that. I'll put it on Slack, right? So then we can discuss, because I think we are making good. This is good progress in my view. Yeah. So we don't have conclusions yet, right? But I think this is. So I'll put on Slack to see when we could meet next, right? And then we can hopefully have a recurring slot agreed somehow. But it was I wanted to start discussing it, but we have to, of course, discuss it with more people and stuff like that. Yeah. Okay, so what I propose next week is do it next week, Tuesday at 8, right? Because all the 9 o'clock slots are taken, except for Friday. But Friday is a bad thing, I think, in Europe, because it's 6 o'clock, which is typically, or even Ireland, Liam.
Yeah, it's 5 p.m. for us, but Friday evening is
bad, right?
It's not so good.
Demanding, yeah.
Yeah. The tug of the weekend is too close.
Okay. So what about Tuesday 8? Is that better? 8 p.m. So 5. So 4 o'clock your time. 4 evening, Liam, and then 5 would be.
4 in the evening is perfect. Yeah, there's no problem. I have no problem at all with that time. It's perfect for me. But
that would be 5 p.m. CT for. I'll propose that for now, and then we'll see. All right, but I really appreciate. I think that was very good discussion, and then I'll share the slides as well, and then I'll share this prototype a little bit. I need to clean it up a little bit, but I was just dumping. I like to make it practical, so it's more easy.
Yeah.
All right, appreciate.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Good meeting.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.